If you ever feel out of control around food, you're not alone, and you're in the right place to learn practical, no-nonsense information about why you binge and how to stop. Binge eating does not mean that something is wrong with you. It's a natural but primitive brain response that you can correct. If you're ready for change, sign up for the Brain Over Binge self-paced online course for less than $20 per month. And if you feel you need personalized support, we also offer one-on-one coaching and group coaching. To learn more, go to brainoverbinge.com/subscribe. And I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the Brain Over Binge podcast, where you learn a simple, brain-based approach to ending binge eating. I'm your host, Kathryn Hansen, and I recovered from binge eating and bulimia over 18 years ago. And since then, I've strived to provide guidance to anyone who also wants to be free of this painful problem. On today's show, I have a guest who read Brain Over Binge and put an end to her own binge eating habit. This is the 8th Recovery Stories episode that I've done, and I've linked the other 7 in the show description if you want to check those out for more inspiration. Because all of the guests in those episodes have unique journeys through their eating disorder and recovery. There is something very powerful about hearing someone else's story and the insights that they had along the way that led them to freedom. Today's guest, Marta, also has a powerful story to share. And if you have a strong connection between binge eating and emotions, I know that you'll find today's show particularly helpful because Marta also had this strong connection. She was able to separate the emotions from the act of binge eating and break the habit. She explains all of this and much more during our conversation, and I'm excited to share it with you. Welcome to the show, Marta.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really glad to have you here. You reached out to me to share that you have put an end to binge eating, and I felt like you had a really inspiring story that could help a lot of other people. So you're just here today to share that, and I think it's going to be a great conversation. The first thing I want to ask you is just, to introduce yourself, maybe where you're from and how your eating disorder got started.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm Marta. I'm from Italy, but I lived abroad for many years. And my eating disorder started in 2018 after I moved to England after America. And it was just a very tough moment for me because many things happened in a very short time. And it all developed into an eating disorder, like very, very quickly. And I didn't understand why. I didn't understand how. I just knew that when I was feeling stressed or anxious or sad, my body was telling me to eat. I tried to overcome that. I identified that I had a problem. So I went to the psychologist, but that really didn't work for me. It all came across to me that in order to actually resolve my eating disorder, I had to resolve many other problems. But that for me was not correct because I started thinking, okay, there are so many billion people in this world and all of them have problems, but not all of them have an eating disorder.
I think our experience was very similar there in that we didn't really resonate with the idea that the eating disorder was caused from emotions and other problems. And even though it seems like for you, it was connected in some ways, like when you felt stressed, you felt the need to eat, but that doesn't mean you have to resolve all your stress to stop the binging because like you said, there's so many people in this world who have stress who don't binge.
Exactly. So to be honest, I like therapy, but not to solve this problem. Therapy could be good for many other reasons to discover part of ourselves that we don't know. But for solving something that is a habit is, for me at least, it wasn't the right way, the right goal to go. So this rang a red flag to me. So I stopped therapy. And at that time, I believed I had PCOS because my gynecologist told me this. And so I subscribed on Facebook on a group about people that they had these problems. And as because statistics show that many people with PCOS have eating disorders, I started asking in this group, like, hey, is anybody of you that has this problem? How did you solve it? And a girl in that group, unfortunately, I don't remember her name. I don't know who she was. She suggested to read your book. And that's the moment where I bought the book. I think I skipped through the first part. I went like on the method that you had. And then I went back and I read all your story, like the way that you actually discovered that. And I was like, this is amazing. And really training your brain, like really saying no, really understanding that is a habit, that I was associating food with emotions, that there's not a connection. I trained myself to do that. Mm-hmm. So by applying what you wrote in your book, I actually started doing it less and less. And now definitely I'm out of that, because I identify when I'm stressed and angry and upset. I know all these feelings, but in my brain doesn't come up to open your fridge and, get numb with all the food. So I need to thank you a lot for this.
Oh, well, I really appreciate that. I mean, it means so much to me to hear from people who are in that struggle, because I know how hard it is. And then to find my book and to resonate with my story and to, put an end to it is just really powerful. And, I congratulate you for that, because even though I know what you read in my book was a part of that, you ultimately had to do it. You had to decondition the habit. So I just congratulate you on your success. There's definitely some questions I want to ask, because a lot of the things you said, I know that the listeners will be able to relate to or have questions about. One thing I want to dive into a little bit is the PCOS. So to kind of back up a little bit, and forgive me if I'm wrong here, but I think it's polycystic ovarian syndrome, right?
Yes, okay. Correct.
And I've heard too a little about this and like how it can lead to some abnormal cravings or, overeating or things like that, because it is a hormonal issue. Can you kind of explain that, how it showed up in your own life?
Yeah, actually, I was 15 years old and I went for the first time to my OB-GYN, and she detected that I had some cysts in my ovaries. Therefore, she diagnosed PCOS. It's just later on in life that I went to a nutritionist, and she told me, well, but how do you know that you have PCOS? Because I wanted a diet for that problem, to solve that problem, because I write books and it's written that with diet, you can actually solve the problem. Okay. And I told her the reasonings why I had PCOS. And she said, that's not enough. You need to get blood tests. You need to get your hormone levels checked. Like, it's more than one criteria that you need to have in order to have PCOS. I did the test, and actually the result was negative. I mean, I didn't have it. And that for me, like believing that I had an illness, I think it caused me into more stress and into thinking more about that. And it's a little bit of anxiety, like believing that I had an illness that actually I didn't have. So definitely to get that diagnosed, there need to be more than one criteria. Like, one is the cysts, one is the testosterone level, hair growth, of course, that is linked to the testosterone levels, and that can lead to also insulin resistance. Therefore, the cravings is where all it comes from.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I've worked with people with different types of hormonal imbalances and things like that. And, of course, anyone listening, like, get the proper medical attention and what you need to heal any of these physical problems. But it can lead to sort of a mentality where you're blaming the binges on a physical problem, and
definitely,
just because a physical issue causes some abnormal cravings doesn't mean then you have to follow that into extreme massive binges. Maybe you're overeating a little bit. Maybe it's leading you to some food choices that you need to correct and work with nutritionists or whoever you need to work with to get it under control. But it's never a reason to binge.
Definitely. We always have the power to don't do that. Yeah. It's always our choice.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing some of the details on that. Did you find that on the forum? And you said that's where you heard about my book, from someone on some sort of Facebook group. Were there people there that also were struggling with binging?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely with eating in general, because of course, like before it becomes binge eating is emotional eating. And then it all leads in terms of like us believing that we don't have the power to stop. But definitely, yes, there were many people that had the same problem, because at my post, many other girls replied, stating, "Oh yes, I would like to find a way."
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely an empowering story that you tell as far as just taking control and not letting that be an excuse. And I realized that you ended up finding out that that wasn't the case for you, but it also shows that the mind is kind of powerful. Even if you think something's wrong, it makes it a reality.
Exactly. That was like one of the most crazy things, because I thought I had it. I went into research. I saw that 90% of people that have PCOS are obese. And then I started stressing out on my body. I started seeing myself bigger. There were many other things in my life, like not 100% positive. So all these things, my mind played a big role, like the biggest role. And I blamed many things on my binge eating, but actually it was just an habit, a bad habit that I developed, and that actually once I discovered how it was formed, it was not that difficult to overcome. It all cleared up quite soon, because once I stopped doing the habit, once starting saying no, then it all went smooth. So it's about trying doing that and believing for real that it's just a habit and that we have the power.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if you can sort of take me through that a little bit as far as when you learned that and then you had those habitual urges come up, because of course they don't, go away right away. How were you able to then, stay separate and realize that's not what you really wanted and that wasn't connected to your emotions? Like, kind of explain how those early days went for you.
Yeah, I can say that definitely when it was maybe a very big day at work or something happened more big, it was harder than other days. But what can I say is that the first thing, it was really identifying what triggered me, like which type of emotion. And by doing so, I was trying to listen into my body, what was happening in that specific moment. Was I angry? So feeling like this stomach tight, or why I was feeling like that urge. So like really understanding what emotion I was associating with food. And then one thing that I did in the first time, that I don't know if it's correct or not, but with me worked. So I could eat lots of peanut butter. So for the first moments, for the first few weeks, definitely I got the peanut butter out. Like I said, okay, that is my go-to. I get it out. And then, but I don't want to eliminate it, because I don't believe that dieting and elimination and all that is good, especially if you have an eating disorder. Like, it's the opposite. So later on, I started to reintegrate all those foods, and now I eat them. I have them in my cupboard. So it's very cool to think about like how I was and how I am now. But definitely what helped me the most, it was that if it happened, I was forgiving myself and moving on, like really forgiving myself, because to stop the cycle. Because for me, what was the worst, it was binge eating, and then feeling numb, and then feeling guilty, feeling ashamed, and then feeling, very sad. I don't know if depressed, but definitely like falling into this vicious cycle. And that, I think it was driven much by guilt.
So much of what you said, I feel like, is really helpful, especially I want to go back to the peanut butter example. Like you said, I don't know if this was right or not, but I got the peanut butter out of the house. And like my immediate thought was, if it works for you, then it's right. Everyone needs something different. And if that's what you felt like you needed and that helped you in those early days of learning how to stop responding to the urges, then I think that's great. And the fact that you were able to then bring it in when you were ready and be able to feel like you have control of it now, I think that's really helpful. And just having that specific example for people is, very motivating and helpful. So thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
And then the emotions part too, I want to dive into a little bit, because it seems like you had some strong connections there with emotions. So you still took your emotions into account when you had urges, like, okay, what am I feeling right now? And it's interesting. I wonder if you could explain how you were able to do that without like blaming the binges on the emotions. How did you make that disconnect while still honoring your emotions?
Well, I think again, because by reading your book, I could really spot out that was a habit. So the binge was not me. It was just the action that I was doing. It didn't represent who I was. It was just a habit. So at that point, I could separate the emotion from the act of binging. Before, for me, it was like, I'm feeling sad, I'm binging, I'm guilty. It was all one thing. And then I could say, okay, then that is not my emotion. That is only an action that I'm doing to cover up this feeling. And one thing that I did as well, now by talking, that it comes back to mind, is that letting my emotion be. So if I was feeling sad, I was crying and let myself feeling sad. And that helped me as well. Instead of suppressing my emotions with binge eating, with food, I was letting myself be. And now I still do that. I like to feel my emotions.
Yeah, it's like honoring the emotion and honoring yourself and letting yourself feel whatever you feel and realizing that the urges and the habit, that is the neurological junk that I talk about. That's the action that you don't have to do. That's the habitual loop that you got yourself in. So it's like realizing that the emotions are real and deserve your attention, but the habit does not deserve your attention.
Exactly.
That's great. I mean, I think, a lot in my books, I talk about, okay, it's not about the emotions, but there's a way that these ideas are compatible. Like you can still honor your emotions and still break the habit.
Exactly. Because I think that, of course, we tend to think that the binge eating is driven by emotions, but the difference is that we all have emotions, and that is because we're humans. So we think that all our actions are driven by emotions, but actually our actions are driven by habits, or we act upon our emotions. It's not our emotions that determine our actions. So I love to feel my emotions, but again, like as I was telling you, that was a habit, and all our actions are actually habit or inputs that we follow through.
Yeah, there's always a space in there for choice.
Yes.
Another question I have for you is, was restriction in any way a part of your story as far as how your binging started or how it was maintained?
To be honest, no, I didn't restrict myself of any food. I think it was just like many events in my life happened, and my go-to to feel numb was food. Of course, like fat and sugary food, because healthy food, like they didn't give me that kind of numbness. It didn't come because I was restricting myself for foods. It came more as a way of escaping the world, I think.
I think that's helpful for the listeners to hear as well, because I would say, the majority of people I've had share their stories on the show have come from restriction. I mean, I definitely have some people who didn't, who were more like you and just started overeating and it kind of got out of control. But just to hear that it can start in many different ways, but you still end up with the same habit, the same brain that's driving you toward this unhelpful action over and over, and having you seek this sort of pleasure that also like helps you numb out, and it gets reinforced. And before you know it, you just kind of feel out of control. But it's great that you were able to take control pretty quickly. Like you didn't suffer from this for a massively long time. So I really commend you for taking control. How long have you been free of binging?
Now it's been 3 years.
Wow, that's awesome.
I'm happy with it because now I know that it won't happen. And even, like sometimes I let myself eat more, maybe like more sweets or more whatever, but enjoying life. But I'm not doing it to compensate a void into myself, or, like to feel numb or to do anything like that. Is pretty much because I'm with friends or family and we enjoy a meal out. So even if in the moment of binge eating, it seems like that this could never happen, taking control over food, it can happen, and it will happen by breaking the habit. So it's all possible.
Yeah. And it's great that you are able to enjoy food and indulge a little bit, and it's not a problem. And I love that you don't have that perfectionistic mindset, because I think that can really get in the way of a lot of people. And then something else that you mentioned earlier was like, if you had a binge early on in recovery, that you just kind of got right back to doing what worked for you. You didn't feel guilty or dwell on it or go into this period of feeling so low and sad, and you just kind of got right back on track. And I think that's very, very, very important. And I hope all the listeners really take that to heart, because it can be so easy to have a binge and think, oh, I've failed. When you haven't,
Yeah.
you just acted on the urge and then you just focus on the next urge.
Yeah, definitely. And also probably like think of how many days I didn't binge. I mean, now it happened once, but how many days it was for me for is already an achievement, is already, it's something ongoing, it's already a progress. So yeah, like being nice with ourselves, because that's the most important, I think. Yes.
Yeah. So what is your life like today now that you aren't struggling with this anymore?
I would say like I still have problems. I mean, like everybody does. I still have my ups and downs. I have a normal life. I have a job. I have a house, boyfriend, but just without binge eating. One thing that I remember about that time, I was focusing the whole day long about food. In my mind was only food. Now I feel my head much lighter, let's say, much more space for conversations, for interactions, for hobbies, people I love and all that. So it's great.
Yeah, that's great. I love that you said that your life is basically the same, but without the binging. And I definitely can relate to that. I mean, I remember like, oh, I still have so many problems. I still have all these difficult emotions, but I don't binge, and it's so much better in so many ways. But it's not like recovery makes you into this perfect person.
Yes, exactly. We're still the same person, but just with an extra experience in our life.
Yeah, for sure. This has all been just really amazing for you to share. Do you have any final thoughts or words of encouragement for the listeners?
I would just say, read the book, go on with what is written there, really try to apply it, because for me, it's what worked. And again, I'm not against therapy, but for breaking the habit, it's just a little bit of willpower to say no to the urge, and your life will be the same, but without the problem, and you will eat all the food and you will have control over the food. So yeah, you can do it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Marta. I truly, truly appreciate you sharing your story.
Thank you, Kathryn.
I hope you gained many useful insights throughout this episode. And thanks again to Marta for doing an amazing job sharing her story. For those of you who are new here, I published a second edition of my book, Brain Over Binge, last year, and I recorded the audiobook myself. So if you haven't read the book yet, I hope you will check it out on Amazon or Audible. And I would love it if you also left a review for either the book or the podcast if it's been helping you, because this really helps more people find Brain Over Binge. I also want you to know that sometimes the book is all people need, but some people need more personalized support. And we offer that as well through one-on-one coaching and group coaching with our extremely knowledgeable and compassionate coach, Julie. You can go to brainoverbinge.com to explore what we offer, and there are also links to learn more about coaching in the show description. Thank you so much for being here today. I know that you're capable of creating your own recovery story. And as always, I want to encourage you and remind you that you have the power to change your brain and live a binge-free life. The Brain Over Binge podcast is produced and recorded by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC. All work is copyrighted by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC, and all rights are reserved. As a disclaimer, the hosts of the Brain Over Binge podcast are not professional counselors or licensed healthcare providers, and this podcast is not a substitute for medical advice or any form of professional therapy. Eating disorders can have serious health consequences, and you are strongly advised to seek medical attention for matters relating to your health. Please get help when you need it, and good luck on your journey. Need more help? You can find all of our current and upcoming options for support at brainoverbinge.com.